Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I dive into a particular film. And this week, it's still 1935, and we have another John Ford film. And boy, should this one have been left in 1935. And joining me to talk about is my buddy Joe from the movie club.
Hey everybody.
Yeah, this is a fun one, Joe. But for those who haven't tuned in to Welcome to the Wasteland before, we have three segments. We have coming attractions for the week of January 5th. FU, it's January, endless trash.
Endless
Uh,
trash.
and then we'll get to our feature, which is Steamboat Round the Bend, which they said in the movie. And of course, I said roll credits, and I wish the movie ended there. And then we have recommendations for you. But this is an interesting weekend because January is either usually a dumping ground for random films that probably don't have a whole lot of potential, or it's widening releases of Oscar films. And what widening release, well, actually, Netflix release in particular of an Oscar frontrunner, Joe, do you have at least some excitement for?
Really, when we were going over the recommendations earlier, there really weren't that many films because, like you said before, January just tends to be a dumping ground for really bad films or, films that are still in, contest for winning awards, basically.
Mhm.
And the one that really caught my interest is the Society of the Snow, just because of the filmmaker working on it, as well as, just the concept of it, go on IMDb. The summary is a flight of a rugby team crashes on a glacier in the Andes. The few passengers who survive the crash find themselves in one of the world's toughest environments to survive. So, a lot of drama. I mean, I've seen some of these trailers, a lot of good cinematography. I'm sure it is definitely going to be on any film goer's list if you're looking to see what the best of 2023 had to offer.
I did actually get a chance to see this. It definitely lives up to the hype being a very strong film centering on this plane crash. The
Okay.
one that I'm going with, which this is high concept comedy to its fullest, which is Self-Reliance. So this is written, directed, and starring Jake Johnson. So if you're a Jake Johnson fan, this is produced by The Lonely Island. And basically, the crux of the film is given the opportunity to participate in a life or death reality game show, one man discovers there's a lot to live for. So basically, Jake Johnson is pulled into into a limousine by Andy Samberg, playing Andy Samberg, who invites him into a contest where if he could survive for 30 days without being murdered, he wins. And basically, the idea is you cannot be killed if you're not alone. So if you're with people, they can't kill you. And there's this dynamic, it looks like, with Jake Johnson, Anna Kendrickson, Andy Samberg, Christopher Lloyd, Wayne Brady, Gata from Dave. So it seems like it's a fun cast. I'm interested that because this is a Hulu film, this is getting a one night special only release in theaters. By the time this releases, it's gonna come out on January 3rd, but then in a week, I think it gets released on Hulu. So I don't know. This seems like a crazy enough concept. Apparently, it's only an hour and 25 minutes, and I'm like, I could roll with that, especially for January. The biggest release this weekend though is Night Swim, and I think they're trying to catch the fire of Megan from last January, which made a
Yeah.
ton of money. But the thing
And it was a
is,
good film too. Like it was a
Megan
surprise
was
film.
fun.
Yeah.
This movie doesn't look fun.
No. And it takes a concept that like I think most people are afraid of. Like my fear of pools is that, getting dragged in while you're swimming. So like if you screw up in that concept, then you just screw up in making movies.
Yeah, I don't swim very well, so this is a fear for me. But this has Oscar nominee Carrie Condon in it and Wyatt Russell. So, and it's from the producers of Megan, because this is from Atomic Monster and Blumhouse. So it's James Wan and Jason Blum teaming up again. I think they're just gonna rule this weekend every year moving
It's
forward
it
because
it's so funny. Anytime you mention Wyatt Russell, all I think about is that meme where he basically is in the Captain America costume for that Winter Soldier, and they compare him to looking like Carl from Up, and like you just
Carl
can't.
Fredrickson.
Dolph Fredrickson, yeah, because his face is
because
like,
his giant jaw and big ears sticking out of it. Oh my. Well, we will be seeing US agent again
oh
in
yeah.
Thunderbolts whenever the hell that comes out. But
If Marvel can get their stuff together, I think they're only releasing one MCU movie this year, right?
we're getting Deadpool 3. But
There you
there's
go.
six series coming out this year. So we will see. But we're on to our feature film of the week, which is Steamboat Around the Bend. And I've been trying to do show notes for the films, and last week I had like a legit laundry list of things to talk about. Not for this one. This is a 1935 comedy, air quotes, very strongly put
Yeah,
in there, based on a 1933 novel by Ben Lucian Berman. And this actually was Will Rogers' last film. This
yeah,
was released posthumously. He died in a plane crash. The Will Rogers, his collaborations with John Ford were some of his biggest box office successes in his career up to this point. And let's give a little bit of synopsis here to this particular film because for a film that's only an hour and 20 minutes, this, for some reason, has a lot of crazy stuff going on in it. So, Steamboat Round the Bend, starring Will Rogers, a Louisiana con man enters his steamboat in a winner-take-all race with a rival while trying to find a witness to free his nephew about to be hanged for murder.
mhm.
There are three movies in this one movie, and I don't know
Hilarity
how
ensues.
and then I don't know how effective any of them are. But Joe, what are your general thoughts on Steamboat Round the Bend?
So this is gonna sound really selfish, but the reason why I did choose this film was because it sounded like Steamboat Willie.
Oh, I wish we watched Steamboat Willie and we're discussing that instead.
Well, the funny thing about this too, and don't mind me, guys, I've got like a cough drop in. I'm coming over a cold, so I apologize if it sounds a little weird. The one thing that I felt like when watching this movie is that, like you said, there's a lot going on. When I feel like a lot doesn't have to go on, the main movie is just this race. You know, it's this race. The secondary plot is the story about his nephew being convicted of murder and falling in love with a swamp gal. He's a river boy. She
Yep.
falls in love with a swamp gal, and like they really try pushing that at the forefront. They really try pushing the love interest. To me,
Yep.
we make fun of tropes in modern movies. They were doing that back in the day when it comes to love interest, and there really is no this female character. I wanted to ask you, this female character is not well written, is not well developed to the point where her motivation just come out. No, like one minute she's sticking a knife and a fork to get ready to murder our main character, right? But there's no real indication as to like why her character would even really do that. It's just a very her decision making and her motivation just seems so out of left field at times that it makes it really hard to really empathize with her.
Well, and what's so weird about this? So you have the steamboat element of this. You have the fact that his nephew is going to be hanged for murder.
Mm-hmm.
And you have all this going on, and then you have the love story between the nephew and Anne Shirley's Fletty. And then you spend a decent chunk of this movie with Fletty and Dr. John, Will Rogers' character, spending a lot of time together bonding and flirting, oddly. And I'm just like,
Who's the
is
love
this
interest?
is this movie going to turn out to be like he steals his nephew's gal while he's rotting in prison? And there's like it I don't know if it was meant to be on purpose, but it definitely gave off that vibe. And I'm just like, I'm gonna hate this movie even more if this is the direction that it goes. And it was just so weird. And you're
It,
spending this time there, like obviously flirting with each
yeah.
other. And it's also creepy because she looks like she could be like 20. And like Will Rogers definitely, actually, we could confirm. Oh
60 something,
God,
right?
he was only 55?
55, okay.
He looked older.
He did look older,
Still,
yeah.
like he's almost triple her age, it
Oh, yeah.
felt like. And it's just one of those kinds of things where Wait a minute. This actress was 17.
Oh, come on.
So,
Oh,
oh God, that just makes it even
so that just
creepier.
made it even worse.
Yeah, she was born in 1918,
Oh no.
and this came out in 1935. So yeah,
Oh,
so it's weird, it's creepy, and you would think that would be the worst thing in this movie,
nope.
but it's not.
Well,
But
buckle in, folks.
which, first off, this comedy has the worst tonal issues.
Mm.
Because like the start, you have this like big like guy on a boat talk about Moses and Jesus and all kinds of stuff like that. And then it's introduced to Dr. John. He's very obviously a con man. And you're having some fun with it with the Pocahontas, whatever the hell he's selling, which also just
It's alcohol.
which is just,
It's straight alcohol.
racist to begin with. Uh,
Yeah.
and so, like, you're having fun, and then it gets serious. Like, oh, my nephew's gonna be locked away. And then you have like a standoff where these guys show up to like murder people,
Yeah.
and it becomes super awkward because this film doesn't know when to include music.
Nope.
Because there's that whole sequence of like these guys coming into straight murder. It's just complete silence and awkward silence. And then you're like, this is awkward, but it's supposed to be thrilling because you're like supposed to be afraid for these characters, but you're not. But like, what
And
the
to
hell's
add to
going
that
on
too,
here?
they did play music. To add to that, they did play music, and it was for like the schmaltzy blur effect image of this 17-year-old girl looking out into the water.
Yeah. Which, yeah, they waited until after all that happened and then decided to throw in some random music.
Seriously, it's
And
weird.
it's just the whole entire thing is all over the place tonally, and it's just like, what the hell's going on with this movie? And this movie's only 80 minutes, and it's trying to balance all these different kinds of elements. Like you have parts where it's dealing with like this serious thing where his nephew might be hanged, and then the nephew this whole entire time, or basically gives himself up,
Yeah.
and then
That scene was funny though. I
they,
did find that scene to be funny though,
they
because
go
like
to the
they
sheriff
go
and
up to
he
the
just
sheriff's or the mayor's house, and they're just like, "Hey, I'm giving myself up." He's like, "Yeah, here are the keys. You can just lock yourself up." Like,
yeah, and you're just
I
like,
found that to be
ah.
kind of funny. Here
Which
you
there's
go.
also a handful of characters that are such southern caricatures, like the sheriff, that you can understand half the words they're saying. They're like Boomhauer.
Oh my
Like
god,
some of the characters on Doom
I need to put subtitles at some point.
or specifically the character from Waterboy.
Oh, Bobby Boucher.
Skedaddle. The
Oh,
guy,
the
yeah, some of the characters were that you couldn't tell what the hell they were saying. So,
yeah.
you have that element, and the whole middle of this movie is the shenanigans of this 55-year-old and 17-year-old doing stuff. And then that's when it gets racist. Like,
Buckle in, folks.
so first off, we got Stepin Fetchit back again, who plays basically the same character that he's played multiple times. And I like, he's taken roles that he's given, he does his best with them, and basically they're like, which Joe, what did you send me immediately after you finished this movie?
Well, there was a scene. There's a sketch from Key and Peele where a African American civil rights activist passes away, but his son felt it was a good idea to show his early Hollywood reels. And basically, it was Stephen Fletchett's all of his characters he's ever played,
Yeah.
and I was yeah,
And like this character is the comic relief. And it's so offensive and uncomfortable to watch. And like Fetchett's committing to the bit. And it's just so obnoxious. It's not funny. And
no,
then they had a mannequin riverboat at one point, and some of the figures in there were obnoxiously like old-timey racist looking dolls of black people. I'm just like, oh my, we're doubling down here.
oh,
And
not to mention too, like if we're doubling down, we got Robert E. Lee and the Pride of the South. going
Yep,
on.
and of course, and then there's a whole scene where all the townspeople are like super excited about Robert E. Lee, and it's just like, of course. It's so funny because John Ford makes very distinctly Westerns, very distinctly Southern Pride films, and Irish films, and it's just like, what's going on here? And then the movie decides to get into its main idea, which is a riverboat
Race.
race.
Yeah.
Which this is like the only part of the film where I actually have some like decent praise of like technical elements and stuff like that. Like them, there's some like pyrotechnics and stuff they had to do in this sequence that like I'm sure that was dangerous. And Joe,
100%.
did you notice who the two closest actors to the fire were?
Of course, the
Two
racing,
black characters. I'm just like,
and
oh
they're
my
just
God.
screaming, "Come on!" I got so worried
Yep.
watching the movie in my condo because if you go outside my condo, you're passing by,
Uh,
and you could hear what I'm saying. I had to fast forward or mute certain things they were saying in case anybody's thinking I'm like, thinking I'm racist or something. Like
I'm thinking you're one of
like
the
the
good old
crows.
boys, Joe.
That's what I mean. Like the crows in Dumbo, we know are bad. Like this takes it to a whole nother level.
Whole other level. And
Whole other
basically, like, and Joe, you made this point. It's a race. It can be thrilling. It's well shot, but they're also
level.
riverboats.
Like basically, two movies come to mind that were made. This movie sandwiched in between two movies that I feel like have really good special effects when it involves racing.
Mhm.
The first one is the film by Buster Keaton, The General, I think it's called,
Yep.
which
For the
involves
train.
basically, yeah, blowing up a train essentially, and that's very exciting because the man almost died being on that train and almost split himself in half, and you could see that. And what I got a kick out of my research was seeing how people got so excited that they would like when they had the take of them blowing up the train, people like saw it like a big spectacle, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, they
And then
went to go watch it.
exactly, and then on the other end, there's a movie that comes out in 1940 called The Bank Dick, which is a double W.C. Fields comedy
Mhm.
that at first does start off a little slow, has the typical W.C. Fields shtick, but has one of the funniest and awe-inspiring car chase scenes. Like, imagine wacky races and W.C. Fields being, "Oh, I'm drunk driving a car." It's so funny, but it's a car. And the two things those movies have excited, in common is that while a train can be slow, a train is also a huge, powerful engine, and there's a lot you can do with it. The
Well, and
same
you
thing
throw
with
it
a car,
off a cliff too.
like throw it off a cliff, essentially. Or, a car, there's a little bit more flexibility. You can go in reverse, you can go
Mhm.
backwards. When you speed up the footage, it looks like a big deal. And then you get steamboats. Unless Mickey Mouse is riding it and carrying a steamboat on the back, steamboats are not really exciting things to show chasing each other. Like, don't get me wrong, seeing the fire come out of
The
the
stacks and
horns,
everything.
the
Yeah.
stack, yeah, is really impressive, especially for that time. But even when they're speeding up a steamboat, you're still watching a rinky dink steamboat. There's nothing really
Yeah,
exciting about
the
watching two very
riverboats are
slow machines.
so big and
Yeah,
clunky. And I think John Ford did the best he could to like make sure it's
the
edited in a
angles.
way and angles
Yeah,
and stuff to make it thrilling, but like they did
they're
actually have to
steamboats.
speed up the film to make it look like they were going faster.
Exactly. They're big, clunky, awkward boats.
So, and in the end, this movie had all these things going on and felt like none of the thing was really satisfied.
No.
So, I did not like this one. This is definitely towards the bottom for me of the John Ford films.
I wanted
And
to ask you a question too, though,
yeah,
because there was a lot of plot things that didn't make sense to me plot wise. So basically, they want to show and they want to afford lawyers. That's why he has like this wax museum thing with the mannequins, so that he
yeah.
can afford to get a lawyer. But then you find out later on they didn't even need to hire lawyers. All they needed to find was this riverboat new Moses guy to basically say he saw it out of self defense. So like, why didn't they just get this guy to just show up and say, "Hey, no, that's not what happened." The movie would have been ended much sooner, right?
Well, you know what's funny is in the IMDb plot summary, it says they need to find a witness, but they don't like. Here's the thing. The plot summary of this movie only summarizes the last 20 minutes of the movie. There's an hour of film up to that point just doing all this other stuff. And in the end, this just felt like, nah, it didn't make sense. It
And in
just,
the first 20 minutes, they said, "Oh, he saw me and knew it was something." In the first 20 minutes of the movie, why wasn't the whole movie finding this new Moses guy?
well, like, I know they were trying to get money to buy the riverboat and trying to get there and then fix up the riverboat and doing all these shenanigans. Well, Joe, they needed more time for shenanigans to show the 55-year-old flirting with the 17-year-old.
And it wasn't even that good. I mean, get W.C. Fields in there, and it probably would have been more entertaining.
Which, to be honest, I was not a fan of like any of the Will Rogers John Ford films that I've watched, and
They made money though.
they certainly did.
A lot of
Well,
people
that's the
liked them
thing.
though.
I'm not the biggest fan of Transformers movies, most of them, but they sure made a lot of money. It's one of the kinds of things where it's just like I'm on the precipice of reaching some of his biggest films ever. And we're getting real close. It's just very interesting that John Ford seems to be the Adam Sandler of directing, where when he really goes for it, is amazing. And
Mm-hmm.
then he makes offensive trash like this the same year that he was
It's kind of
well,
appropriate. We're watching this near January, right?
yeah, and he won an Oscar for Best Director in 1935 for The Informer, the same year this movie came out. So consistency might not be the biggest thing for John Ford up to this point, but it's this film is certainly a film of its time,
Yeah.
and it'll be very interesting to see some of his other films moving forward.
Yeah.
But on to our recommendations, so things that we actually want you to watch. Joe, what do you want to recommend to everybody?
So, like I said before, I'm feeling a little sick. There's this flu going around that caught from some family after Christmas. So I pretty much
Yep.
just self quarantining myself. It's not COVID, but just kind of like taking care of myself. And for me, I've got comfort food, and comfort food is in comfort shows. And my comfort show is Always Sunny in Philadelphia. So
Mhm.
I am streaming the first season. Just finished the first season, and I'm on to season two, which a lot of people don't realize. You could have Danny DeVito in the show, and he is the show. But you can also take him out of the show, and you can have good episodes that don't revolve around Danny DeVito. And that's what
Mhm.
this first season is like. Is that you have what you love about Always Sunny in Philadelphia with these four main characters, and it's still as entertaining as the series goes on with Danny DeVito. It just gets elevated with his shenanigans.
Mhm.
And we're talking about an old guy with shenanigans. That's the old guy. I would rather have, Danny DeVito.
Oh my God, Danny DeVito as Dr. John.
Oh my God, selling Pocahontas, that would be great.
Oh my God. I It took a while, but I finally got around and watched all of Always Sunny with a lot of big recommendations from Joe, and it's certainly worth it. And I watched the most recent season live as it was coming out and still got it.
Oh, 100%. What, 20 years? 16 seasons, 20 years the show's been on the air, and it's still as good as when
Still
it first.
going. Longest running live action sitcom ever. So good for Always Sunny and good for us because it's still coming. So I have a couple of recommendations. My first one, which is a new film released, I finally got around to watching this on VOD. It's called Mutt. This is a film about a trans man who is basically it's in a day in a life kind of story of them trying to get a vehicle to go pick up their father from the airport in New York City and going through all kinds of like shenanigans, running into an ex at and having a fling at a club, trying to reconnect with their sister who they don't get to see very often. It's very much like this small scale kind of drama and it had great central performance and it was pretty affecting film and very timely. And it's not something that like has these like big big idea themes, but it's just, dealing with like the day-to-day experience and definitely worth a watch. You could rent it on Amazon. That's what I wound up doing. One film, I actually got a lot of movies off my watch list this week since I've been out of work because I'm on vacation. And one of them that really stood out to me, which this early A24 film, The Spectacular Now. I've heard a lot of things about this, but I never got a chance to watch it. This
What's it
film
called?
starring The Spectacular Now, starring Miles Teller,
Ooh,
uh, Shailene Woodley, Brie Larson, Caitlin Dever, Kyle Chandler, Bob Odenkirk, and it's a pretty Jennifer Jason Leigh. It's a stacked cast,
yeah.
and um Miles Teller's character is uh he's one of those class clown kind of characters from like high school, and like everybody knows him, and he's recently broken up with Brie Larson and winds up dating Shailene Woodley, who's like a really nice girl who wants to go away to college, and like basically she's bringing out the best in him, and I really enjoyed the film. It goes to some dark places, and it goes to some of the things get a little too like feel like you're watching a movie, a little too over the top, but it's really impressive, especially watching this 10-year-old film and seeing all these actors and where they've grown up into at this point.
Yeah.
But also, Shailene Woodley's character was too good for him. Uh, just throwing that out there. And then one film of mine that I rewatched was The Mustang. And this is like a really small indie film that came out pre-COVID, and it's about Matthias Schoenaerts. He plays a very, very angry man in prison who winds up joining this program where they break wild horses and sell them off. And like it's this whole entire story about rehabilitation in prison through this connection with animals.
Oh, wow.
And his performance was fantastic. The way that he like showed his anger and everything on screen, it was like white knuckling at points, and it was a really poignant and impactful film. And it's definitely one that flew under the radar for a lot of people. And it was one where I'm like, I definitely want to rewatch this at some point. And still, this is probably the second time that I've watched it, still hit really hard. Some of the supporting cast, like Bruce Dern, is the one who runs the program, and Jason Mitchell from Straight Outta Compton. He's one of the other prisoners. But it's definitely a film worth checking out if you can find it. I own it, so I didn't check to see if it's like streaming anywhere. Let's see. Mustang. It's on Netflix. So the most accessible of streaming services, because even if you hate it, you have access to it somewhere.
There you go.
But those are some recommendations, and that's a wrap here on Welcome to the Wasteland. Joe, thank you so much for coming on, especially in your recovering state.
It's getting there. I've seen the worst of it, but it's on my way. I always enjoy talking about films and hanging out with my buddy.
Yeah. And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.